All right, folks, we are live. All right, we want to welcome everybody to our Facebook Live. It is the night before our launch. Our classes go live tomorrow at CatholicStudiesAcademy.com. My name is Jason Gale. I'm one of the co-founders of Catholic Studies Academy. I'm joined here with Dr. Bruce Kelly, who's our theology lecturer, and Dr. Benjamin Smith, a co-founder and the philosophy lecturer. And so today we want to do two things. First, we want to address frequently asked questions, and then we want to get into the importance of the intellectual formation for both our spiritual life, but also the cultural problems and the cultural situation we find ourselves in today. So first, the frequently asked question that we've been getting a lot is, do I have time? Catholic Studies Academy is giving me a course in theology and philosophy at the same time. Do I have time to do these things? And so to address that, we would just say yes, because it is leisure-based. The way we offer our courses is they're video lectures, and each week you receive a class, and you're welcome to watch it that week. You can save it for next week. There are no tests. There's no quizzes. We do provide study questions towards the end, and you can take those on if you want. There's recommended reading that will enhance your learning, and so with all of these, you could take your time. You can go through it as quickly or as slowly as you want. You can watch the videos once. You can watch the videos. You can come back to them again, because the professors, what they're trying to do is we're trying to condense some of these material into an abbreviated lesson. So we want to give you kind of the breadth of what you would get at a four-year university, but we also want to make it something that is not too terribly intense. And so the question, do I have time? The answer is yes. Mm-hmm. And you can take that however your schedule fits. You can listen to the lectures in your car. You can watch them at home. In any of those ways, we just try to. Part of our goal was to make this as flexible as possible. Right. And if you look at our prices, we also wanted to make it as affordable as possible and accessible to everybody that wants to learn more about theology and philosophy and study these two really together. So secondly, we also want to talk about tonight the importance of the intellectual formation, both for our own spiritual life in the church, but also why the intellectual formation is so important today in our current cultural milieu.
That sounds fancy, Jason.
That's right, it is. We're fancy here at Catholic Studies. So Ben, we'll begin with you. So when you're looking at the culture today, what do you see as some of the cultural or intellectual problems that the modern person may come into contact with?
Sure, thanks, Jason. So there's one of the main reasons that we started Catholic Studies Academy is in order to meet really this kind of lack of intellectual formation that many Catholics experience, especially with a lot of the sort of philosophical errors or challenges that we face in our contemporary society. One of the, it's interesting, we've all talked about this a lot, but there's kind of two extreme errors that we run into in our contemporary culture. And one is, on the one side, what you could call scientism, and on the other, relativism. So scientism is the view that I talk about in the Introduction to Philosophy course, that only science is reliable as a way of learning, a form of knowledge. And this approach is sort of an overconfidence maybe in science. This doesn't, scientism is not the same thing as science. Science is a method, but scientism is a philosophical theory about science that limits knowledge, objectivity, and truth to just science, and then puts basically everything else, like, everything about religion, about morality, about culture, and takes it and puts it like in the subjective realm, so that all of that sort of stuff just becomes just a matter of opinion. It's whatever you want, right? That's scientism, right? On the other sort of end of the spectrum is relativism, right? So if scientism is sort of an overconfidence in human reason, relativism tends to be sort of a lack of confidence in human reason and the ability to know the truth. And so, as you probably know, relativism can be expressed in the view that man is the measure of all things, of things that are, of things that are not, that they are not. So that comes from Protagoras. The idea is that truth is relative to what I feel like it is, to what my experience tells me it is, rather than thinking that truth is based on reality, a reality that can be known by reason. So in a lot of different ways, we can see ourselves challenged either by scientism or by relativism. So I think when it comes to Catholic faith and these two sort of obstacles, on the scientism view, and I'm sure Dr. Wilson, you run into this, you'll hear people say, well, there's no scientific proof that the resurrection happened, therefore it must not have happened, right? As if that's a good argument against it, right? You've probably heard something like that, right? Or on, say, moral issues about, say, the family or marriage or things of that nature, or maybe even the nature of political community, we hear, well, that's all just a matter of opinion. Everybody has their own way. Every form of love is just the same, or is equally valuable, or every lifestyle is equally valuable because it's all relative. So on either of those fronts, right, whether you're talking about things that are maybe supernatural in the faith, right, or maybe moral issues, you run into one of these two areas. And one of the things that Catholic Studies Academy want to do is equip our fellow lay Catholics and other Christians to be able to deal with those issues, certainly in a charitable way, but in a way that's intellectually rigorous.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that especially as Catholics, we need to step up our intellectual game, and to not, sometimes even within the church we could see it placate where religion, well, that's just more about your relationship with God or your relationship with Jesus as opposed to knowledge. And they kind of separate these things in a false dichotomy, but it's those doctrines that reveal the face of Christ. But it's also the truth about, and philosophy addresses this, what is reality? Can we know it? How do we know it?
Right. Yeah, it's a false dichotomy, because in any friendship, any relationship, right, a big part of that friendship and relationship is getting to know the reality of the other person, right? That's what you really want, right? You don't want to it's a fake friendship if you only have sort of the veneer, right? You actually want what's real about that other person. That's what really is the foundation of the friendship.
Yeah, and even within the church, if you look at the statistics, many of the people that leave the church because of what she teaches. It's an intellectual problem. And some may say, you look at some of the other statistics and it says, well, they encountered a problem or an issue, and so they drifted away, or they just flat out left. Many times it is simply because they were presented with a problem and nobody had a good answer for them.
Right.
And that's one of the most important things that we want to try to do, is to help you, to give you the tools to be able to provide those answers for those people that God has entrusted to your care. And so, Dr. Bruce Kelly, maybe you could talk to us a little bit more, particularly about how within the realm of theology, or even within the realm of the church, why there is this need for intellectual formation.
Right. Well, I see numerous problems today. One is you pointed out false dichotomies, right? So this is a really common problem, is drawing false dichotomies, and one of the reasons this occurs is because people don't know how to make distinctions, right? Which and this is one of the reasons one should always study at least some scholastic thought.
That's right.
Right. Whether you want to be scholastic or not. Yeah. But it's important. It's important, right? We have to draw distinctions in order to avoid false dichotomies, right? So that we can say that a thing might be true in one sense but not in another. Where we see, the "love is love" slogan, right, which ultimately meant that same-sex marriage was equal to heterosexual marriage in the eyes of the general public. That is born of this incapacity to draw distinctions, right? So now there's a false dichotomy. Either one is pro same-sex marriage, or one is pro-hate, right? Because love is love, right? You're either in favor of love or you're against it. Well, I mean, okay, Well, that we can avoid that if we train our minds, right, to draw distinctions properly and to avoid false dichotomies. So that's one thing, right? I would also say that that we see again in this failure to draw distinctions and to think clearly. We see that contemporary Western Christians have a propensity to assume a deferential posture toward the world, where we ought to hold a position that says, "Look, I'm doing you a favor by introducing you to the truth of the gospel,
Right.
because in fact, this is going to save you."
Yeah,
right?
it is good.
It's good. It's better than what you have, right? It's good, and it's about the most important thing there is. I'm actually, it's an act of love for me to share this with you and to do so with confidence that I know the truth. And but instead, what we do is, you see, because we want to be humble, right? Doesn't the gospel teach us to be humble?
It does.
So right. So the result is we downplay our own system of beliefs, putting it on a par with all others, right? As if I don't have any special claim here that puts me in any position to. I'm judging you by saying that I know the truth. I know a truth that you don't have.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's an error, right? To do that, and it's hugely detrimental. So one of the things that I think comes out, you just mentioned some statistics about why people leave. I recall a study at some point several years ago, which dealt with the problem in Latin America, where many people will convert from Catholicism to something sort of Pentecostal, right? Highly emotive, or some sort of evangelical brand of Christianity. Okay. Right? And one of the reasons that was given as a dominant reason for people converting was, get this, right? A lack of a sense of moral clarity within the church.
Confusion
on moral question, on moral teaching within the Catholic Church.
Sure.
Now, one would think, well, wait a minute. Actually, the church has a huge patrimony of moral teaching, right? And a lot of it is tremendously clear. Okay, if we know where to go and how to understand what's written. But from the pulpit at a practical level, often we don't encounter that, and our catechesis is in terrible shape, right? It has been for now decades. So I've spent a good deal of my time in the past 10 or 12 years, right, studying John Paul II and Joseph Ratzinger, who are famous, right, for encouraging a more intellectual approach to the faith. And of course, this is not to say, right, that they downplay mercy and love and all these other things. Right. But that again, it's a false dichotomy, right? To say that one either has clarity on matters of faith and dogma, or one is, just overflowing with mercy and love.
Do you think that, like, loving somebody, it's a good idea to know what's good for them?
I think it is, and to tell them in a way that's clear, right? If they need to know it.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where, when you look at the fact that people leave because of some problem they've encountered and no answer they received, or because they disagree about what the church teaches, in all of this, there needs to be that clarity. And the thing for us as Catholics to first realize, in order for that clarity to be out there amongst others whom we encounter, that clarity must first be in our heads. And that's what I think, the study of not just, learning the faith, whether it be through a solid catechesis and then hopefully going deeper, but also looking at it from a philosophical standpoint, because many times our sacred texts are denied today. And so to begin with Christ, it's difficult to begin there. So we have to begin with some sort of approach that looks at reality, but also presents the gospel as good news, and to be able to do it in a way that's clear, And when you think about the whole of the church's teaching, what the church teaches about, say, human sexuality, that's part of the good news,
right?
Whereas many times, even when it is taught correctly, many times it's taught, kind of, I don't want to say apologetically, but kind of. This is kind of, very apprehensive,
Almost
whereas, and so it needs to be taught with that clarity. And so, in whether your primary apostolate is out in the world with your coworkers, with your friends, with your family, that clarity in you will come out.
I think one of the jumping here, one of the things that's important about clarity, right, is having a focus really on truth. Right. If you're going to be clear, right, if you're going to be able to say things in a way that's understandable, that's not confused, that's not ambiguous, then really what you're going towards is you're trying to match reality. You're trying to match the way things are, not necessarily the way I want things to be, or how I feel like things ought to be, or that sort of thing. Right. You're making something outside of yourself, outside of your own subjectivity, the standard. Right. And that really pushes you towards, I think, at least the attempt, the effort towards clarification.
And I think that's where the real humility does come in, is to recognize that this truth exists outside of my own inclinations, even, or my own wantings.
Sure. Right.
That's an act of humility. And so I think, as Catholics, to begin to confront the problems in our culture, but also to correct and to guide those that are in our church, in our families, our friends.
Even in ourselves.
It begins within ourselves, and that's really what we want to try to do at Catholic Studies Academy by providing a study of these two areas of theology and philosophy to bring that order to our own thought, but also so that it doesn't stay there, but also to help us to have that clarity in our own presentation of the faith and of truth in general, to those that are outside of us. And I want to point, and we're going to end on this, I want to point to this passage which from the book of Acts, it's kind of subtle, but I think it really hits at what the world needs today. And it comes from the book of Acts in chapter 17. And I have a particular care for this passage because it's where my namesake comes from. But it's in Acts 17, beginning in chapter 5. But the Jews were jealous, and taking some of the wicked fellows of the rabble, they gathered a crowd, set the city in an uproar, and attacked the house of Jason, seeking to bring them out to the people. And when they could not find him, they dragged Jason, because Jason was hiding the disciples at the time. When they could not find them, they dragged Jason and some of the brethren before the city authorities, crying, "These men who have turned the world upside down have come here also." That's how the disciples were described in the book of Acts. These men who have turned the world upside down. And I think, in our current cultural milieu, that's what we need today. We need Catholics to look at everything that's going around. It was interrupted. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and end. I apologize for that interruption.
Technical difficulties.
We want to just encourage everybody. Our courses, they're going to go live tomorrow. And so we just want to encourage everybody. Check us out at CatholicStudiesAcademy.com. Check out our current course offerings. We give you the whole year's curriculum so you can see what's also coming up. So until next time, God bless.
Thanks.
We'll see you.